just moving a little aside from the technology and from the very specific technical issues, let me share some best practice concerning the implementation of co-firing. I would like to share my personal experience from Denmark and also from Poland, and I would like to touch some logistic issues which in my opinion are very important. What I see a very crucial element is that effective biomass co-firing implementation is to actually start up the lasting biomass market, because I would like to underline this word lasting, because when we want to keep co-firing technology going on, we need to have the continuous supplies of biomass, and this is not possible when we don't have the well-developed biomass market. Just when the co-firing of biomass was starting in Poland, it was starting not on the agro-biomass or the biomass from the fields, it was starting on the biomass from the forests. Because the Polish forests, the national forests, were able to supply large amounts of biomass actually on spot. And that was just very convenient for the power plants, because they had the access to the biomass supplies, and the properties of the biomass were more or less the same, because wood from the forests, of course, you can consider coniferous wood and the other wood, but in more or less the range of the properties is stable. And after the biomass market has been developed, then after we can think about the lasting co-firing process. Without the biomass market, it's virtually impossible to think about co-firing. So in our opinion, in my opinion, and basic also on in Denmark, there was an opposite approach. The Danish, when they started the biomass co-firing, they were basing on the agro-biomass. So they were contracting the biomass from the farmers. They were not using the wood well, they were using some biomass from the woods, but they were basing on the residues from the agro industry, from the farming, from the fields. They were basing on the straw. And at the beginning, and what is the conclusion? At the beginning, the biomass should be contracted when we look at the case of India. So that's my opinion. We should contract the biomass from the farmers in the simplest possible physical form. So without much processing, because too much processing brings the costs. And we don't need the costs at the beginning of the process, because if we put too much costs on the biomass suppliers at the beginning, we will not be able to develop the biomass market. And maybe the proposed form of the paddy, which should be supplied to the pilot plant, could be the ballots, because the ballots are quite simple to prepare. Not sophisticated harvesting equipment can be applied, and also the transportation is quite easy. We can use the trucks and the tractors to transport the bales or the ballots, while the pellets are, in my opinion, more complicated to be transported, because they are prone to disintegrate when there is the humidity. When we have the humid air, the pellet will break. So we will need the special transport to protect the pellets from the moisture, from the moist air and the moist wind, and also the rain. So, and in the ballots, it's not the case. And maybe, but I would like to underline, maybe, that's only the suggestion, some advanced fuels like the straw pellets could be considered as a supplementary to this not much processed biomass, or just as a next step. Because that's quite complicated to prepare the pellet. It's an energy consuming process, so that's a costly. And also the transport and the storage should be specialized, not like the ballot. But again, when we consider the ballots or the bales, long-term ballot storage can also be risky, because we were, as you remember, we were considering different scenarios. And in one scenario, we were using 2,000 hours, 3,000 hours, and in another 5,000 hours. So it brings the differences in effective time of biomass combustion, and the difference of the effective time means that we will need to apply some storage. And some ballot storage can also be risky. So if open air storage is applied, the biomass may be self-ignited. So we should be aware that the self-ignition may appear. And we had such a case in Poland when there was no rain, no moisture protection. So here you can see some fire of the ballot open air storage. It happened in Poland. It was a straw. So the straw ballots were combusted in a small CHP plants, and the storage yard was just beside the CHP plant. And one day or one night, suddenly the fire has appeared there, and there was really a big fire, and it was very hard to put out this fire, to stop burning. When the ballot storage starts to burn, it's actually impossible to extinguish the fire. In this case, the guys of the power plant, and they were just waiting until it will stop by itself. So maybe we should consider some roofed biomass storage, very simple roofed biomass storage, when we consider the storage of the ballots, maybe with the walls, or maybe without the walls, or maybe the other sort of the walls, but for sure some roof should be applied. So, well, yes, these are some, let's say, logistic issues and some our comments concerning maybe the further thoughts on the development of what kind of biomass we should use and what form of biomass should be applied, to what extent we should try to influence the farmers, what kind of incentives should be applied, because just again to underline, first, the biomass market should be somehow imagined and thought and organized, and then we should think about the technology, because when we first will think about the technology and we will not have the biomass in the form which is required, but this technology, we will not be able to successfully co-fire.